Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Boozer. I'm with CUGC HQ, and I am happy to welcome you to today's Connect with Nutanix. We're going to be talking about simplifying your management and operations and intelligent insights for your VDI landscape. And I'm pretty sure that most of the hour is going to be devoted to demos, so that's always exciting. But before I turn things over to Brian Suhr, I am going to introduce our moderator for today. It is DJ Eshelman. He is a Nashville CUGC leader and a CTA, and you can follow him on Twitter at the Zen Master. DJ, would you like to say hello really quickly?
Hello really quickly. I do it every time. Hi, everybody.
Awesome. DJ is going to keep an eye on the questions. So as Brian is going through his demos and the presentation, please feel free to type your questions into the question box. And we'll get to some of them throughout the presentation and a lot of them at the end. So just be patient and we'll try to get through as many as we can. And without further ado, I will hand things over to you, Brian. Let me get you the screen and you can get us started.
Sounds great. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. Everybody who's live, and I guess if there's a replay, listening to us on the replay. I just got a couple of slides I'll talk through up front, and then we'll get into going through everything on the demo. So briefly, just a little bit myself. I'm in a tech marketing role here at Nutanix. That means I get to play with a lot of fun product and solution stuff and kind of operate in between product management and engineering and marketing. So we kind of float in the middle. If you want to follow me, on any of my writings, that's how you can follow me at the sites there. So briefly, a little bit of marketing. Nutanix has Instant on, kind of in collaboration with Citrix, which is really just a way to jumpstart your Citrix on Nutanix deployment. This is focused around deploying with either HV as a hypervisor or Zen server as a hypervisor running on the top of the Nutanix platform. It's just an easy way to help with the design, the sizing, and the deployment to get you started on a great start quickly. We have a number of integrations between Nutanix and Citrix. We have our Acropolis file services piece, which you can use, for different, parts of the solution. We have support for, MCS and PVS with our HV hypervisor. We obviously support Zen server, as a hypervisor on top of that. We support GPU in different, either through vGPU or pass through with HV. We have a plugin for Citrix Director, so if you'd like to see Nutanix platform-related stats inside a Director, that's certainly an option. And the most recent is we have the integration with Citrix Cloud, in a one-click deployment, and I have a slide on that. And it is really kind of this simple. So if you log into our Prism, which is what we're going to be spending the time in here, there's a choice there, as you can see on the screen, connect to Citrix Cloud. And really what this does is it gives you a nice simple form that you'd fill out from the UI that you're going to take your API key from the Citrix Cloud. You're going to provide it to this wizard, and then it's going to automatically deploy either one or two cloud connector VMs and automatically install our agent in the Citrix Cloud software and make that connection, so that you're ready to then just pop back into the cloud control plane and start to provision your resources on top of the Nutanix cluster that's local. And then since my cluster doesn't have GPU in here, I just have a quick slide to show you that if you're using GPUs on HV as a hypervisor, how we present that to you, if you're interested in that. There's a number of different places. So, this is kind of a hardware view. You can see on the lower part is telling you what type of GPUs are in the node, how many. If I was to, edit a VM and wanted to assign them GPU resources, there's, just simply a button. You say add GPU, which presents me a screen like this where I pick if I want to do vGPU and then pick the associated profile, or I could click pass through and it would allow me to pass through. And in each of these, it's telling us, what kind of cards I have available, you know, how much of it's in use, so I understand, you know, if the GPU is entirely used or if there's, you know, still some availability, whether it's a profile or in the pass-through. Just another view, and then obviously we provide some stats, right? So we've got, you know, kind of the first phase on what we can provide for stats around GPU running in the nodes. So we show you, you know, frame buffer usage and kind of overall GPU usage, and then you get a bit of this on the VM side also. Now we'll pop out of this and we will get started on walking through everything in the demo side. So first off, I'm going to kind of, you know, start with the, you know, on the upgrade side. So Nutanix is pretty popular about pounding the drum about having one-click operations. And certainly on the upgrade side, we've delivered that for a number of years. And we do it for a number of different features, right? So AOS is really our, you know, it pops up a warning here. I've got some, you know, in case there's incompatibility of software versions, we protect you against that. So AOS is, you know, consider the platform features, right? So it's all the control plane, it's Prism, it's the storage related features, etc. I can do that in a single one-click upgrade. So if there was any new versions, they would automatically appear here. I could click the download button, and then once it was downloaded, I could click the install button, and it would take off and do a non-disruptive upgrade for me. If I was, you know, not connected to the internet, I can, you know, choose this option, or whether I was in a dark site, etc. I can download the upgrade bits from the portal and just, you know, provide them to this wizard, and it's the same process after that. And we provide these one-click upgrades for all the different layers within the solution. So we have the platform layer. If you're using AF as a file server, then we can do a one-click upgrade on that, and it'll roll through the different, you know, file services nodes so that it happens non-disruptive. We also do it on the hypervisor, right? So if you're running HV as a hypervisor, then the AOS piece gives you the control plane piece. This hypervisor upgrade would give you the HV upgrade. In the case if you're running, you know, Xen Server or ESXi, then we can one-click the hypervisor nodes, but you just, you know, upgrade to SC, you know, the System Center Virtual Machine Manager in your traditional method. You would upgrade vCenter in your traditional method. So we do everything, you know, on the nodes, and then you just have to do the control plane piece. NCC is our kind of our health checking piece where we can, you know, upgrade that out of band. So some of these, you know, have different release. Obviously, when we do a big bang release, these probably all get upgraded, but there can be other, you know, innovations that happen in just one of these, and it'll have kind of a release in software outside, so you don't have to upgrade the full stack. And the last piece is firmware. So we give you the ability to one-click upgrade the firmware. So whether it's, you know, firmware on disks, the BIOS, the BMC, the, you know, the drive controller, you can do one-click upgrade. So make it as simple, you know, as possible for you to maintain and upgrade your infrastructure. So it keeps you both, you know, in compliance for security and allows you to, you know, get the latest and greatest in features and not have to wait for them. Excuse me. I'm going to pop in and start looking at the at Prism in regards to managing your environment, virtual machines, and the host. So what we're looking here is what we call Prism Central, which is really a global control plane. So I can manage multiple clusters, you know, thousands of VMs. Doesn't matter if they're in a single site or multiple sites. It's able to talk to clusters, you know, wherever they are, as long as you have, you know, IP connectivity to them. This dashboard is customizable, so I can remove and add these widgets. I can, you know, somewhat change the content that's within them. You know, if I want to drag things around, give me a different view for them, I have that ability. I've kind of set up some example ones here, so you can also create multiple dashboards. So, you know, I've labeled one as Citrix Infrastructure. I'm not actually running Citrix on this at the point, but basically what I did is I've, you know, added charts for a couple different VMs. So these could be, you know, like my delivery controllers. And if I wanted to watch CPU, memory, storage related metrics for them, I could have them all on this dashboard. So, you know, easily within a click, I could, you know, see how my, you know, kind of my brokering layer is performing. And then, you know, kind of on the same idea, I've mocked up a similar one here for, you know, VDI clusters, right? I could just do this for a single cluster. I could do it for multiples. But in this view, I've kind of put my, you know, my top, you know, kind of top widgets, right? So show me all the VMs that are the top consumers of CPU, for memory, you know, for storage I/O, storage bandwidth, you know, I could put latency, et cetera. Right? So I could pick the metrics that matter in your environment, and it's just an easy way to, you know, see, you know, kind of who the big hitters are in your environment, and makes it easy to see if that's normal. If you got somebody that's, you know, consuming far more resources than somebody else, then, you know, it might be something that's, you know, worth exploring in there. And you could have a number of dashboards. Different users within the environment can have their own dashboard, so it's pretty flexible in that. Now, if we head over to the Explorer view in here, this is where we do you know, a lot of work within Prism Central. So it is multi-hypervisor support. So I get to see the VMs from all of my hypervisors if you have a mixed environment in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on VMs. I have a filter here, so let me take that off. So in this view now I see all the VMs that are under management of this instance. So we can see in the hypervisor column, you know, I do have VMs from, you know, Hyper-V, from HV, from ESXi in here. I don't have a Zen server one in this, but if there was under management, we'd see them in here. And there's you know, a number of ways I can, you know, kind of slice up this information. So we've got different ways to focus. So I'm using the general one, which, you know, gives me these tabs here, which, you know, it gives me, you know, kind of the owner information, the hypervisor, you know, some basic stats about it. There is one for performance. So if I choose this one, then it's going to, you know, flip over, and I'm going to see, you know, a bit more, you know, performance-related stats on here. So I can get a kind of a high-level view, you know, of what's going on, how much they're consuming. I can take a GPU-based view. So if I wanted to see the VMs that, you know, have GPU assigned to them and a little bit how they're using them, obviously I can flip to that view also. And then we can also, you know, apply some other, you know, groupings here. So if I wanted to see VMs with different power states, their health, I'll pick the vCPU count. So we're now going to see color dots that have been added, and then along the bottom we have the, you know, the counter. So, you know, if a VM has, you know, 1, 2, 4, 8, 10 different, you know, the virtual CPU counts, we can see them, you know, along here, so we can easily see, you know, what's for them. I can choose to group by the CPU count also. So if I make that selection, it's going to now group all my VMs. So here's all the VMs with you know, 1 CPU assigned. These are the ones with 2 CPU and et cetera, right? So I can flow down there. If I want to get rid of any of these filters, I can, you know, simply click the X and remove the filters here to get me back to the original state. And then I can look at this in a list view. We have the tile-based view, which gives you a little more condensed, and then you can, you know, do it in circles. And this view is kind of nice because it's easily see the health. So you know, I can see if something's unhealthy, powered on and off for that type of view. And then final over here to the side, or kind of, you know, some additional filters that you can apply. So we can add labels, which is you know, associated with this little kind of label badge here. And these you can make yourself, right? So if you wanted to label all the VMs in a certain desktop pool with a label, and then you could just, you know, click the button, and it would immediately sort the list to only show those. Or if you wanted to have VMs at a certain site with a label, or label all your Citrix brokering infrastructure with a label, you know, it's just a quick way to slice and dice and be able to get a view for that.
So hey, Brian,
obviously, yep, go ahead.
Are those labels specific to your account here on the portal, or is it across the board?
The labels are across the board, so they're a global piece, right? So different people logged in would be able to see those.
Perfect.
Yep. And then we can filter, you know, if we wanted to see just VMs on a certain host, a certain cluster. We have a notion of a category, which if there's time, I'll explain later. If you wanted to just see, you know, VMs that are on a certain hypervisor, you know, then we can expand it and, you know, check the box. It also gives us a count here, you know, of how much is on each hypervisor. So we just check the box for, you know, the ESXi one, and it'll sort the list and then, you know, show us, you know, for the given hypervisor.
Cool. Hey, quick question.
Yep.
The data in Prism Central, we're wondering if that is available for export, like to Excel or another method like that.
So we do have there is some export, so you can do some CSV exports, and then we have a reporting, basically a report wizard that you're going to report in PDF, so obviously it wouldn't be good for Excel, but yeah. And then we do have on the roadmap where we're going to make all these stats available via the API. So if somebody would want to like query Prism Central with another tool, that'll be coming. And then, you know, like memory usage. So if you want to look at, you know, VMs that are operating between, you know, a certain percentage, there's some, you know, out of the box ones you can check the box, or I could say like, you know, show me VMs that are, you know, from 20 to 30% of, you know, memory or CPU usage, right? And we can do this for a number of metrics. I won't go all through these. So there's a number of storage. You can sort them by, you know, whether they're over or under provisioned, which I'll be talking about later. If you want to look at them for a certain GPU configuration, there's just a lot of ways we allow you to kind of slice and dice this information. And then, you know, obviously, if you just want to find a single VM, I can, you know, just type demo, and this will, you know, sort the list to anything, you know, that has a demo in its naming scheme. And if it's more than a page, you know, I can then just paginate through it, and I can control, you know, how many rows I want to see on the screen to some extent, from, you know, 10 to 60 rows on the screen at a given time. So let's, you know, take a look, and obviously these are clickable, right? So if I click on any of these, I can then start to see stats for this given, you know, virtual machine here. So I see a number of, you know, common stats here. Tells me a bit about the information, whether this VM's had any alerts, if it's had any anomalies within the last 24 hours, which we'll talk about here in a second. Tells us whether it's, you know, over provisioned, and if it is, for what. And then we have the idea of a project, which is really, you know, project and owner, which is really more around self-service. So if you were doing cloud, you know, some type of cloud deployment and using our self-service, we can tell you, you know, what project owns it, and, you know, who the person that owns that particular VM is, as well as some basic configuration information. If I want to counsel the VM, I can do that from here. If I want to know a bit more about, you know, the individual disks, you know, so if this VM has multiple vDisks, I can see them here. Snapshots, alerts. I'm going to go into the metrics piece right here. So beyond the, you know, the basic, what I would say, the traditional stats here, where we show you, you know, the actual consumption at some period of time, we have what we call anomaly detection, which is based upon learning the behaviors of each individual virtual machine. So the dark blue line, you know, the spark line here, is the actual consumption for CPU that we're looking at for this given virtual machine. The blue kind of, you know, line that wraps it, this blue area, is what we call the baseline, and that's the learned behavior for this virtual machine for its CPU. So if the CPU metrics or any of the metrics that we monitor this for, you know, vary either above or below, you know, this baseline, then we create what's called an anomaly. So in this sample VM, I made the, you know, the CPU spike for a brief period of time, and it was registered in this anomaly, right? So depending on your workload, it may be common for this VM to fluctuate, and, you know, we shouldn't be concerned about it. So if it does go past that baseline, then typically we care about it, and when we want you to understand that, right? So that's considered to be, you know, a normal, and we make this anomaly, and we show it by the bell here. And you can tell exactly, you know, the point in time where it's at. If I wanted to click on this, like if there was multiple anomalies, we'd see a lot of these little lines. If you wanted to just look at one, I could click on it and click at the details, and it would show me you know, just the chart that only, you know, layered on the one anomaly. And then we can see the baseline then adjusted, you know, starting kind of within a day after. It starts to relearn where my lower end raised and my upper end, you know, raised, and that's kind of my new learned baseline. And that will course correct, you know, over time if that kind of anomaly doesn't persist and be a new normal for that virtual machine. And then we do that learned behavior for all the metrics here on the left, right? So CPU usage, wait time, we do it for memory usage, number of I/O metrics, and some network-based metrics. So it's, you know, pretty helpful to see this. We can see, you know, these charts for the last 24 hours, the last week, the last 3 weeks, and then if we, you know, click the prediction button, it'll you know, predict out into the future to give us an idea whether that workload is going to, you know, continue to you know, go in an upward direction, downward direction, you know, et cetera. Let me flip back over to my other cluster and give you one more view on virtual machines. That is fairly unique. So I've just sorted this one, so that I can see this one virtual machine. Again, I see kind of the same charts here. I can see, CPU ready time, all the storage and memory usage. We can go down to the virtual disk level. So we can see this VM has multiple disks, and I get all my, I/O metrics on all the different disks. And it even tells me working set size on a per vdisk level, right? So if you have a workload and you kind of want to understand what that working set size, which is, helpful in understanding, how a workload fits in with the cluster and how it might affect your, flash usage, et cetera. So it's real nice to know what that active data set size is for that. And then this is kind of more of a capacity and just I/O-based view of it. And then last up, we have this I/O metrics tab view, which is one of my favorite features. So obviously, we show you, read versus write latency. We show you the performance distribution in working, in basically read size and write size. So 50% of my writes are in the 4 to 8K block size, and the other majority are at 8 to 16 K size. So if I was doing, virtual desktops, as an example, they have a pretty predictable working set size. So if I had a desktop and it was, doing, all large I/O writes, they might typically be doing something that might not be expected to happen in a regular virtual desktop, unless maybe it's a developer and they're doing, some type of work around that. And then again, I get to see, rather than just, latency at a given point, I can see, the majority of my read latency, 92% is in, 1 millisecond or less, and the rest is in 1 to 2 milliseconds, and the same for writes. And then we tell you where your reads are coming from. So in this case, just a little less than 1% is coming out of DRAM. So you can think of that as, kind of NVRAM, if you understand what that is. It's basically memory cache. And then, 99.7 is coming out of the flash layer. And this is a hybrid, cluster that we're looking at. So if there were any reads coming from the hard drives, we would see them from here. And then we get to see, random versus, reads, whether they're random or sequential, and writes, whether they're random or sequential. So we really try to arm you with the best information and do it, on a per VM level, and even down to the individual vdisk so you can understand what's going on in your environment. Pop back over to my other thing. Excuse me. And then much of the metrics. So if we go down to the clusters, or down to the hosts, we can see a lot of these metrics, for the same thing at the host level. So obviously, if I click on a host, I get the traditional, charts for CPU memory and disk. But they also have the anomaly detection here, right? So for a few less stats, but I can see, at more of a global level. We can see, I've forced the CPU to go up dramatically in this host, so it exceeded its baseline and went up again. So I see until this behavior was learned, there was quite a few anomalies that were detected in here, and then eventually it starts to relearn the behavior. And over time, as this behavior is learned, we'll see my baseline tighten back down. But since my jump was so big, the baseline it gets really wide until that is proven to be a different behavior for that.
And then quick question on that. So that's a per, those stats are per host, right? So it's, if you have a host that has a different CPU structure than a different host, that would be specific to that host, not like across the board?
Correct. Yep, we're looking at per host. Yep. So you get to see them on the different hosts. So obviously you can get a lot of stats at the cluster level, VM level, like I showed, and even at the host level. So we try to give you the granularity to figure out what's going on. But, with things like, patches being applied, or you upgrade an application, or even like the Spectre meltdown stuff where you're potentially making a change to hundreds or thousands of VMs, you probably are going to witness that at a higher level, like at the host or the cluster level. So it's nice to have those views there. And then, all the stats I'm showing you are there regardless of hypervisor, right? So in my environment, we have a mixed example here. But since all these stats are, in our platform, we're pulling these from all the different hypervisors and show you all this anomaly detection, all the regular stats are the same regardless of the hypervisor that you use. All right, next we'll take a look at the planning side. So planning is really going to be focused upon capacity planning, so understanding what's going on in your environment today, how much capacity you have left, and then if you want to do some planning on what it would look like to add resources to your environment. So we've got scenarios here, which I'll come back to. First, we're going to take a look at the runway, and we'll click on our example cluster here. And runway is really based on CPU, memory, and storage capacity. And runway is simple. How many days do I have left before I run out of any of these resource buckets? And we can see that we've got different values here. This would be a little more compelling if I had real workloads, but I tried to simulate it, and here's something so that it would be a little bit more compelling. So what it's telling us here is based upon our current consumption and a recent increase, if we continue to go there at this point, which is 312 days out, I would be 100% utilized for my effective capacity, right? So it's telling me I have 312 days if I continue on this path before I run out of CPU resources. And then a little bit more for memory, and then more than a year for storage, right? Because I'm not storage consumed. And then this is kind of my overall view. If I wanted to flip over and look again at a certain host, it'll then draw this and show me similar charts, and I could understand whether one host is growing faster than another as an example for that. And then down below it provides us some stats to support that. If we flip back to the overall one, then I get to see kind of a list of my top consuming VMs from my excuse me, from my CPU consumption. And then on memory side, it's going to show me a similar view, and then top VMs consuming here on a memory side. And then based upon, if I don't think I have enough runway, right, I've got a few choices. I could certainly, add more resources. We're hyper-converged, so you could simply, if it was memory, I potentially could just add more memory to my nodes. If I had available drive slots, I could potentially add more storage to the nodes. If I need compute or I need all of them, then I could just simply add another node or multiple nodes to my cluster and expand that and get more runway as part of that. I also have the option to, regain resources, which we'll talk a bit about more later. But if I click this optimize button, it's going to tell me, I have some over-provisioned VMs, and here's roughly, there's potentially 22 vCPUs and some 54 gigs of memory I could use. And then there's a couple of inactive VMs that have some storage, capacity that I could consume, right? So we'll talk a bit more about that. I won't dive too much in that. So we're going to help, in ways that you could recoup resources rather than, having to immediately add resources as far as getting more runway back. And next we'll back out of here, and we'll take a look at the planning piece. So we'll go over to the scenarios, and let's create a new scenario. And, I can use this scenario. We call them what-if scenarios. Basically, what if I added a workload to this cluster? What would it do? And I could also use this for basically modeling a new cluster. So, it defaults to new cluster. So I could add my workload, which I'll do here in a moment, and then it kind of helps you size what a new cluster would look like. But we're going to look at expanding a cluster. So I'm going to pick my brand new cluster. I think my target for runway, we're going to say 6 months. So we can see based upon the charts, I have, 6 months is marked in the middle here. I have more than 6 months for all of them. So now I'm going to add a workload. So there's a number of default workloads in here, SQL, VDI, which I'll choose. We have, canned, VDI choices. So whether you're running Vue or Citrix, we'll pick Citrix. We're going to say we're a knowledge worker. It's going to be used with machine creation services. Let's add 250 users, and I can pick the date on which I want to add them. And the cool thing is you can actually add them at multiple dates. So I could, create one workload and add, say, 125 users on one date, and then maybe like a month, 2 months later, add those other 125 users. And if it required me to add nodes for those adds, and I could do them in different buckets, it would tell me, add a node on this date for the first workload and add a node on this date for the next workload. So let's pick, April 11th. And say add this. Now, if our default profiles here kind of don't match with your profiles, then you can select an existing VM, right? So if you kind of got an odd size, maybe a developer use case, and it doesn't match with one of these, you can just simply pick an existing VM from one of the clusters and then say, you know, give me 250 of those, and then that'll be more applicable to your environment. So now it's added this workload, and we can see all my runways, you know, are now less than 6 months, so they've gone red. So now I need to add resources. I probably can't reclaim that much resources, so we're not going to focus on that. So I can do it in one of two ways. If I click the Add Resource button, basically I can choose node models here, and I can pick my configuration and do them all manually. We don't really want to do that, so I'll click the Recommend button. And what this is going to do is it's going to tell me how many nodes I should add and on one day. So it's telling me I should add a single node on this date, and then later to keep my runway in check, I'll need to add another node, you know, on July 22nd to keep me in compliance with my 6-month goal for runway. And it's telling me exactly which model I should pick, how many of them, and the configuration. So it's going to choose the CPU, the amount of memory. You know, if I'm all flash, it'll stay off all flash. If I'm hybrid, it'll, you know, tell me a hybrid node. It's going to tell me the exact configuration, right? So really clears up the mystery on, you know, what you would add, you know, as far as meeting your goals for that. And if I wanted to, you know, kind of add a mixed workload, like add some VDI, you know, come back, add some SQL, it takes all that into account, you know, and does that for me. I can save these scenarios. So if I want to come back and look at them later, I can generate a PDF, which will, you know, quickly generate PDF for us. And then you can use this, you know, like to show a project team, you know, show leadership on what you're doing, and it'll, you know, give you the definition. Basically, it'll show you the runway, you know, those nice runway charts of what's going on. It'll tell you what, you know, what you have for existing workload, what you're adding for a workload, what node you should add, and, you know, kind of give you everything with the nice percentage charts here so that you can show it. And, you know, it's just a helpful way for you to kind of, you know, save that with the project team. I will back out of here. We do, since we do support, oops, I don't want to save it. I want to save no. Since we do support a number of hardware platforms, it will give you node-based recommendations based upon the platform that you're expanding, right? So if I choose a cluster that's running Nutanix hardware, it will give me node recommendations based upon that. If I'm running Dell hardware or UCS or HPE or, you know, examples of any of the platforms that we support, it will give me a, you know, a node based upon the make, model, and the vendor that, you know, the cluster is running already. So, you know, it takes all that guesswork out for you. All right, now let's pop back and look at the efficiency. So on the main board, you know, we saw, you know, when I was looking at the planning, I pulled up the efficiency. That efficiency view was just for the single cluster. This one is for, you know, the entire environment. So I have 3 clusters being managed by this instance. So this is all the VMs that would, you know, classify as being, you know, in the efficiency. So we have a number of choices here. We have over provisioned VMs, which is essentially they have, you know, too much CPU or memory according to what they've been learned that they're using, and you could reclaim resources from them. Inactive would be obviously powered off VMs that have been powered off for more than 30 days, but it's also powered on VMs that have been learned to basically be doing no operations, right? So if they're using just a fraction of their CPU and memory, they're kind of just sitting there idle, and they get classified, you know, as being inactive also. And constrained would be, you know, obviously the opposite of over provisioned. They've got a heavy workload, and they're always kind of bumping up against their resource limits. So they are probably worth looking at to see if they need more CPU and memory. And then bully would be, you know, like a virtual machine on a host that is monopolizing a majority of resources versus other VMs on that host. And all these are clickable. If we click on them, my cluster's complaining a little bit. I'm remote, so excuse me. And it'll give me a list here. Let me just refresh and make me log back in. All right, home screen, over provisioned. Okay, so now this is the list, similar Explorer view like we saw before, but now it's showing me all the VMs that have been classified as over provisioned. And if they're actually also classified as one of the other efficiency status, they won't be shown. So it is possible for a VM to be over provisioned in one metric, but constrained in another. So maybe it has too much CPU, but not enough memory. Then you'll actually get to see, that it's, classified as two things potentially that you have to address. And we show you this information, in a number of different places here, right? So like this, this virtual machine here is over provisioned, right? So we tell you this here. If we click on it and we go in and look at those metrics stats, we also surface the information here, right? So the little red, icon here, and then right at the top of the chart, it shows, hey, it's over provisioned. So we try to surface it in a number of places so it's obvious for you. And then if these VMs are running on, our, HV hypervisor, and I go to edit them, so maybe you get a request saying, for an application owner saying, hey, or even a desktop owner, right? My VM is pretty sluggish. I think I need more CPU or memory. So if I choose to edit one of these VMs, go up here and edit where if I was an admin and I wasn't looking at any other places, and I just kind of blindly was following the ticket and I was going to come in here and give it more CPU or memory, is we're showing you the efficiency, warnings right next to the CPU, right? So if this VM, this is over provisioned. So if I'm coming in here and wanting to give it more CPU, it kind of gives me pause. Do I really want to give it more CPU when it's already telling me it's over provisioned? Or, on the opposite is if I'm, coming to add more CPU and it's telling me it's constrained, then it kind of reaffirms that I'm making the right choice, right? Giving it more when it's already telling me it's constrained, kind of reaffirms my action of what I'm doing. And also the same thing for memory right here. So it just, helps kind of back up, the choices that you're doing there. And then, obviously on any of these, if I click on them, if I wanted to see everything, I can click on the efficiency and it'll just show me everything that's inactive, bullied, over, under provisioned, et cetera in there.
Cool. So another question kind of along those lines, is there any intelligence that can kind of alert you or automatically make adjustments for you?
So today we don't auto adjust. Like if it's something's marked as over provisioned, we're not going to automatically go resize that. We've kind of found that most customers are, risk averse to that. It is something that's on the roadmap that we'd like to, further simplify that. So maybe you can just right click and say auto, resize. But today, if this was over provisioned, simply I'd, just choose to edit the VM and then I could, edit the resources for it. So, and based upon if your OS supports hot add and hot remove, you can, do it within those constraints, right? So simply just have to edit and change them. And then let's go to reports. So report is basically a mechanism that you can create, call them pretty reports that you can, hand out to a team, hand out to leadership, for a number of different reasons, right? If you just want to simply get the inventory of your environment, if you want to, kind of have a, we talked about the efficiency. So the cluster efficiency report is going to email you all that waste finding, right? Stuff it's going to tell you things about the runway, for the different resources. It's going to give you a list of VMs that are over, under provisioned, et cetera. And I can have that, delivered to my inbox on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever. So any of the reports that you create, you can schedule them, and the frequency tells you, whether you want to, have them created on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And then you have the choice if you want them to be emailed to you, right? You can just have them, created, and then I can, select a report and just go up here and look at the instances, and it'll show me the different instances, and I could click on one of them and then view the reports. It tells you all the dates and times. If I click on one of these, it'll just, open the PDF for me. But you can also choose to have them emailed to you. So whether it's a couple of people or a distribution list, at the time of generation. Right after, it'll just email you the PDF of the report, right? So if you wanted to kind of email a list of what's going on in the greater environment, it's just an easy way for you to do that. And the reports are easy to modify and create, right? So if I want to just open one of these and choose edit, it's pretty much like you'd build charts here. So I can drag these around. If I pick one of these choices, like if I want to add a CPU runway choice, I can add it in here as an option. And then I can filter, like if I only want to look at VMs with a certain naming string, or I only want to look at a certain cluster for like a CPU chart or things like that. I can pretty much focus these on what makes sense for that. And I can do bar charts, line charts, a histogram. A data table is basically show me a table, enable again which cluster. I can pick some focus on whether it's general and performance, and then it's got the columns that it's going to show. And then if I want to create custom columns, I can just go in here and click on any of these that I want to add basically as a data point within the column, right? So if I want to add CPU runway, VM count, CPU count, it'll just add those to the column or to the table for me. I'll just back out of that. Excuse me. And that's that's the reporting feature. So it's a nice way to get data out in a nice usable fashion. I'll quickly touch on the analysis tab, which is basically a single point that if you want to look at stats at more of a global level, I can do these. So I don't have to go to a specific VM, host, cluster. I can create like a CPU usage chart, and I can add all my hosts, all my clusters. I can do I can still do those granular, like if I wanted to stack in charts here for a single VM or a couple of VMs, I can stack them up here. What I like about this view is I can adjust the ranges here, from months to days to hours. And then where I click on it, this blue bar goes. So this lines up this point in time. So any chart that I stack in here, I can see this. So if I'm kind of looking for a root cause, I can pick the charts that I care about, put them in here. And then when I click on this time, then I kind of look for, basically the red herring on what's, out of normal at a given time for that chart. And then not only does it show me all the charts in time sync, but also if there's any alerts or events happen, they get stacked up here. So, if I'm picking this piece, I can say, well, hey, I had a couple of alerts. And I could look at those alerts, click on these to drill into them and see if any of those correspond to, what I might see, going on in a certain chart. So just trying to make the information as easy as possible so that you can, get to the root cause of what might be going on within that. And then I'll just briefly touch upon, what we call Nutanix Flow, which is really microsegmentation. Kind of a newer use case for virtual desktops. But if you're in a highly secure environment and you might have a need to do virtual firewalls around some of your infrastructure VMs or your desktops, starting in HV in an upcoming version, we're going to allow that. And again, you do it from this single UI. I can create categories and assign my VMs to them and create a security policy. So I got kind of a quick, example here for a Citrix one, where I've put, some kind of, the categories for my different Citrix pieces in here. And then just as a simple rule, I've got, my desktop VMs, my, Active Directory and DNS on, to control inbound traffic and outbound to the same things. And I can say, this group of VMs can talk to these. And if I, hover over any of these lines, I can see exactly, which ports are allowed, versus like this one just has, any. So it's going to allow anything. And so just trying to make the, the security piece for everything as simple as possible. And I can do this in both a monitoring view right here, where I'm just monitoring, not blocking any traffic. So it'll actually watch this traffic and discover all the ports it's being talking to, so that you can then choose whether you want to allow or deny them, and then make it a bit easier so you can understand what's talking to what, and then eventually you apply them, and it would start blocking traffic for that. And that's that's really the end of my piece. So if we got any questions queued up, we can answer those or return it back. Yeah.
Absolutely. Actually, I wanted to talk a little bit about the director integration, a little bit like the plugins. So if you could talk a little bit more about what that plugin looks like and where people can find it and that sort of thing.
Yep, the plugin, is for director as well as our MCS, our cloud plugin. All those are available in our support portal. To customers, right? So they're not easily available to non-customers. So if you're kind of playing around with our community edition, which is kind of the lab version that you can freely get, and you need one of those, then you probably need to reach out to somebody that you know at Nutanix, and they could get you the plugin so that you could kick it around your home lab if that's what you're looking for. As far as the director plugin, it's going to surface a lot of basically the metrics around the storage side, right? So how much I/O, latency, those type of operations are going on, and that'll get pushed up into director via our plugin for that. I didn't grab a slide on it. I wish I would have, but I don't have a director one. Otherwise, I would pop in and show you that also.
Gotcha. And then another question was, is there any plans to integrate with other monitoring vendors in the same kind of way, like ControlUp, Lakeside, those kind of things?
Yeah. So nothing that I would be publicly talk about. So I want to say VM Turbo, but they changed their name to Turbonomic or something, right? They do have support for HV hypervisor, right? So they're able to pull some stats. The Liquidware people have built some, integrations with, I think they're layering. I think even Stratosphere these days can pull some stats from Prism. So there are a number of tool vendors, that are actively integrating with Nutanix, and we see that kind of growing, every day. It's a common thing for us.
Great. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to pop them into the question panel and we'll get those answered. It's a quiet bunch today. All right. Well, this is a rare thing. We've got 10 minutes left and we're out of presentation. That's kind of unusual.
I tend to talk fast, but again, if you have questions afterwards, I posted my, you can reach out to me online, certainly reach out after the fact, and, I'll get those answered for you and, help out where I can.
Absolutely. Any other folks that have, or any other features you're excited about that you want to show us while we have some extra time here?
Yeah, I mean, we hit it pretty well, right? Certainly a lot of these things I tried to kind of explain them in the fact of how they would make sense in like a virtual desktop and user computing sense. But we've got a lot of backup and replication stuff in here where a lot of people use our native replication to kind of ship their gold images and templates between clusters, and different sites to the same sites. We have self-service restore, which really only makes sense in server VMs, or if you do have users that are using basically persistent desktops. They could actually, from their session, they can actually mount a backup and self-service restore their files for them. Is an option that's there for the persistent types of use cases. It would probably be a couple of key ones for that. If you're running AHV as a hypervisor, we offer some additional networking pieces, right? So this is kind of a visualization of what's going on in the network. So I can see, my list of VMs here, whether they're on or off. If I open them up, my lab cluster is pretty much a single VLAN here, right? But if I had multiple networks here, different VLANs, it would show me the virtual network name, the VLAN ID, and then it would code it with a color. It would then show me which, via the color, which network my VM is consuming. It tells me, if we follow the line across, it tells me what host I'm on. And on the right side of the host, those are the physical ports. So whether they're 1 or 10 gig. And then actually on the right, they're not set up, but if I had them we do SNMP discovery of the top of rack switches. So if that was all configured, I'd see my top of rack switch. It would tell me which switch port I was connected to, and it would have those VLAN colors over there. So if I had a VM that was trying to talk on, VLAN 23, and it was connected to the top of switch port, and that color was gone, that would be like a red light indication of why my VM was not accessible in the network, right? Because that VLAN was not tagged on the switch port, as an example. So it's a nice end-to-end view to understand the flow of network traffic through your environment, and also help with configuration on that. If I click on any of these, I get to see kind of the virtual switch layout along with the uplinks, and then again, here these aren't set up, but if there were switches here, I'd click on them and the ports, and I could see, how much packets, drop packets, et cetera, right? I could see some network stats for what's going on.
Gotcha. Question here, as far as all these features we've been talking about today, is there any special licensing on the Nutanix side that is required for these?
So the majority of the features are pretty available, throughout all the suites. The ones, so the capacity planning piece, the learning side, so the anomaly detection of the monitoring, and the reporting is what we call Prism Pro. So that is a licensable feature. Outside of that, pretty much the majority of the features are included in the product as a whole, right? So this multi-cluster management and Explore, looking at your VMs, are all there regardless of what license you purchase. The HV is available in all the suites. It's just part of it. We don't charge extra for GPU support, right? So there's really only a few features that we charge extra for, and that's like the advanced part of the monitoring. If you did do the network microsegmentation, there is a licensable feature for that. So you really get the bulk of it, and then just a few advanced things.
Gotcha, great. And then another interesting question here, wondering if there is an SDK for all of these monitoring features where someone could essentially just make their own monitoring integration with this and just put it into their own kind of single pane of glass kind of thing, if they have something like that.
So we do have a customer, at least one that I know of, that does that. How you do that is through our API, right? We just have a REST API. Actually, Prism, what we're looking at, consumes our REST API. So all these widgets are just making a REST call in the background and then populating it with the data. When I click on Explore and select a VM and want to counsel it, it's an API call. So you can do, I won't say everything, but just about everything, right? Because some of the APIs we call them basically a private API, but the majority of them are available in the published REST API, and we continue to expand that, right? So it's a single API, so all the Prism related things, regardless of hypervisor, are available in there. And then if you are running HV as a hypervisor below it, then all that's in the same API. If you do any of the networking pieces, if you bring in Calm, which is our application automation piece, all that in a single API. And you can get some stat data out of there, and we'll be expanding that, in the future, right? So all that learning stuff will eventually get opened up to the API. So if you wanted to pull from other tools, you could. So a lot you can do today, and that'll continue to get better.
Okay, and just one final question here, and this is one that comes up a lot, but we'll just go ahead and ask it again. Does Nutanix support HP hardware?
HP? Yes. Yeah, we have lots of models and configurations, but essentially it's the DL360 and the 380. There's a lot of nuances between them, based upon the drive cages that you choose and all that, and CPU and memory. But yeah, we've certified 360s and 380s, the Broadwell, and I believe the Skylake is out also. So yeah, there's plenty of options for you to do that. Yep.
Okay. So I think that was all the questions we had for today, and also all the time we have for today. So I'm going to let Stephanie close us out here.
Sure. Let me just put up my last My final slide. All right. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, DJ. That was great. A lot of time in the environment, which is always great. So really quickly before we let you all go, I put a couple of links in the chat window for you. There is one to our forum thread that is specifically for this webinar. So if you have more questions, feel free to ask them there. I'll get them to Brian, make sure we get some answers for you. It's also where we'll post the link of the recording from today. You'll also get that link in an email tomorrow. It will come to you directly from GoToWebinar. And for those of you who opted in for a chance to win the 3D printer, that is also the forum thread is where we'll announce the winner, and on Twitter. So pay attention to Twitter for that information, and we will select that, or someone from Nutanix will select the winner after the webinar, and it's a random selection. Finally, I put a link in the chat to a survey. It's short, it's anonymous, and we just like to get your feedback after our webinar so we can continue to plan more great content for you. And with that, I will let you all get back to the rest of your day. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and thanks again to Brian and DJ. And we'll see you all again soon at mycugc.org. Thanks.
And Synergy.
And Synergy, don't forget Synergy.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.